Have you ever had one of those moments, where everything just goes completely sideways, like seriously wrong, when you're just blindsided and you find yourself asking, why me?
Yeah, it's that feeling of being totally overwhelmed by things you just didn't see coming.
Exactly. And today we are going to dive into one of the oldest and most powerful stories that grapples with that very question, the story of Job.
And to really get a grip on this, we'll be looking directly at excerpts from the book of Job itself,
Oh, perfect.
alongside some insightful commentary from a series called Suffering and Grace.
Okay, cool.
Now, this isn't just some dusty old text, sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Right.
This is a story that speaks to those timeless struggles, those gut-level questions we all have about fairness and trust and the very nature of, well, everything,
Yeah.
when life throws its worst at us.
I think everyone listening has probably had those moments and they've asked those questions and they want answers.
For sure.
And for all of you listening, we know you are the kind of people who really want to get a deep understanding.
Ab-
You're not just skimming the surface.
No.
You're looking for those real insights.
Yeah.
You want those aha moments without feeling like you're drowning in a sea of information.
That's it.
And that's our mission today. We're going to break down the opening chapters of Job's story and really see what sets the stage.
Okay.
How do people react? What are those very first attempts people make to try and make sense of what is happening?
The groundwork.
Yeah.
We're laying the groundwork for some really profound stuff coming later.
All right, so let's unpack this. Right from the very beginning, we meet Job, and we get a pretty clear picture of who this guy is, right? He's described as this blameless, upright, God-fearing man who stays far away from evil.
Yeah, the text paints a very deliberate picture of Job's character.
He has a huge family, 7 sons and 3 daughters.
A big yappy family.
And he is seriously wealthy. We're talking thousands of sheep, camels, oxen, donkeys, a gigantic staff. I mean, this guy is loaded.
He's not just comfortable, he is at the pinnacle of what people would consider blessed.
The text even says that he was the greatest of all the men of the East. So it's like we see this perfect alignment. Righteousness leads to reward.
It's almost like a real-world example of the prosperity gospel, that idea that if you do good, good things will automatically happen to you.
Yeah, okay.
But this is the very assumption that the book of Job is going to dismantle. And it's going to do it in a really shocking way.
Oh, okay, I see where this is going.
It's a story that forces us to confront the reality that things aren't always so simple and straightforward.
Right.
And that sometimes, even those who seem to be the most righteous and blessed can experience incredible suffering.
Interesting. Okay, so we get this image of Job as this incredibly righteous dude. But the narrator makes it clear that his righteousness isn't just for show, right?
Absolutely. This isn't just about outward appearances. Job's righteousness is deeply rooted in his faith.
Okay, so it's genuine.
The text makes a point of comparing him to figures like Noah and Daniel, people known for their unwavering trust in God.
Oh, wow, that puts him in a whole different category.
Exactly. Noah, who walked faithfully with God amidst a corrupt world, and Daniel, known for his loyalty and his prophetic insight. These were individuals recognized for their profound connection with the divine.
But even with this seemingly perfect life, there's this subtle hint of something more going on beneath the surface, isn't there?
What do you mean?
Well, we see that Job's sons would have these regular feasts, these big parties, and after each one, Job would make a point of performing these purification rites. He'd offer burnt offerings for each of his sons.
Right.
He's thinking, maybe in the middle of all the partying and fun, my kids might have secretly sinned or even cursed God without me knowing. It's almost like he's acknowledging that even in the midst of outward blessings, there's this potential for hidden wrongdoing.
It's a fascinating insight into his character, isn't it? It reveals this deep understanding that true piety isn't just about outward success or prosperity. It's about the condition of your heart.
Yeah, and it shows this awareness of the need for atonement, this idea that even unintentional or hidden sins can create a separation between humanity and God.
And those burnt offerings, they represent this desire to bridge that gap, to seek forgiveness and maintain a right relationship with God.
And then, bam! The scene completely shifts, and we're suddenly in this totally different realm. It's described as the heavenly court. And it's this gathering of the sons of God, and they're all presenting themselves before the Lord. And guess who else shows up?
The Satan, or as it's sometimes translated, the adversary.
Dun dun dun.
Now, it's crucial to understand that the Satan in this context isn't necessarily the fully developed figure of evil that we might think of from later religious texts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, here his role is more like a tester, a challenger,
Okay.
someone who scrutinizes the genuineness of human devotion.
Oh, I see.
He seems to take a strange sort of pleasure in finding any cracks in that devotion.
Almost like he's looking for people to fail the test.
In a way, yes.
So how should we understand the concept of the Satan in this story?
Well, it's important to remember that the text isn't necessarily presenting God as the direct cause of evil.
Okay, so God isn't like pulling the strings, making bad things happen.
Not exactly. God is depicted as a being who operates within the context of a world where both good and evil exist.
All right, so he's not like actively causing the bad stuff, but he allows it to happen.
It's more that he's working within a complex reality that includes both darkness and light, and his reasons for doing so often remain mysterious to us within this story.
Okay, interesting. So back to the story. God, right there in front of everyone in this heavenly assembly, he basically brags about Job.
Well, yeah, he points him out as this prime example of a blameless and upright man.
But the Satan, he's not buying it, is he?
Not at all. He's super cynical. He throws down this challenge and says, does Job fear God for no reason?
He doesn't believe it.
Nope. Of course he's righteous, the Satan argues. You've surrounded him with this hedge of protection. You've blessed him with everything he could possibly want. Take all that away, and I bet he'll curse you straight to your face.
Wow, what a bold accusation.
It really is. That Satan is essentially arguing that Job's faith is purely transactional, that he's only righteous because he's getting something out of it.
Yeah, like he's only worshiping God because God's giving him all this good stuff.
Precisely. And it's a pretty cynical view of human nature, but it does make you think, doesn't it? Is there any truth to that? I mean, from a human perspective, it's easy to see how our actions might be influenced by the expectation of reward.
Oh, for sure. We often operate within these systems of cause and effect. Do something good, get something good in return. It's natural to think that way.
Absolutely. And the Satan cynicism taps into that very human tendency to question the purity of motives. Even when it comes to our most devout actions, we might wonder if deep down they're driven by some degree of self-interest.
Okay, so what happens next?
Well, in a move that feels almost like a setup, God gives the Satan permission to test Job.
He agrees to this.
He says, all right, go ahead, mess with his possessions, his family, everything he has, but you absolutely cannot touch Job himself.
Whoa, it's like this massive cosmic experiment is suddenly set in motion.
It really is. And this initial permission establishes a crucial theological point. Even forces that seem evil and destructive are ultimately operating within the authority of God.
So the devil isn't this all-powerful being running around doing whatever he wants.
No. The text makes it clear that even the devil's actions are subject to divine decree.
Wow, that's an interesting concept. So God's allowing this to happen for a reason, even if we don't fully understand what that reason is.
Exactly. It suggests that even suffering, even evil, can be used to serve God's larger purposes, even if those purposes are often hidden from our view.
Okay, but the story doesn't end there, right? There's more to this heavenly court drama.
Oh yeah, there's another round. God again points out Job's integrity. Even after he's lost everything, he hasn't cursed God.
So Job's passing the test so far.
But Satan, he's persistent. He comes back with another challenge.
Let me guess. He doesn't think Job's faith is genuine yet.
You got it. This time, the Satan argues that Job has only held on to his faith because his physical well-being is still intact.
Oh, so now he's going after his health.
Exactly. He says, go ahead, let me strike his very bones and flesh, and I guarantee you he will curse you to your face.
Oh, man, this is getting intense.
It really is. And once again, God grants permission. But this time, the Satan is allowed to inflict terrible physical suffering on Job, these loathsome sores that cover his entire body.
So God's letting the Satan cause him physical pain?
Yes, but there's still a limit. God insists that Job's life must be spared.
So it's like God's drawing a line. The Satan can inflict suffering, but he can't kill him.
Precisely. And it's a really powerful illustration of the extent to which God permits suffering, even suffering orchestrated by an evil force, within the boundaries of his own ultimate plan.
Okay, so the stage is set. What happens next?
Well, we get this relentless, rapid-fire sequence of absolutely devastating news. It's like one blow after another. Messengers keep arriving, each one bringing more horrific tidings than the last.
Oh, this is the part where everything just falls apart for Job.
It is. First, his oxen and donkeys are stolen by the Sabaeans. Then all of his sheep and servants are wiped out by what's described as the fire of God, most likely lightning. Then his camels are stolen by the Chaldeans, and their keepers are killed.
It's like everything he owns is being taken from him.
And then the final, most crushing blow. All 10 of Job's children are killed when the house they were feasting in collapses in a sudden windstorm.
Oh my gosh, that's just unimaginable. To lose all of your possessions and then all of your children in such a short span of time, it's just, I can't even imagine the pain.
And the way it's described, with each messenger arriving, one after the other, it highlights the utter totality of the destruction and Job's complete isolation. He's left with absolutely nothing.
And there's that phrase that's repeated over and over, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee.
It just drives home the point that he's completely alone in his grief.
You'd think anyone in that situation would just completely lose it, right? To be consumed by rage, to curse their fate, maybe even to curse God himself. But Job's initial reaction is, well, it's almost impossible to comprehend.
It really is. He tears his robe, shaves his head, falls to the ground, and then he worships.
He worships God after all that's happened.
Yes, and this act of worship, in the face of such unimaginable loss, is so incredibly significant. It completely contradicts the Satan's prediction that Job would curse God.
So he's proving the Satan wrong.
Instead of lashing out in anger, Job's immediate response is to acknowledge God's ultimate authority and express his deep, unwavering faith.
And then he says those incredibly powerful words, those words that have resonated throughout history. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
It's an incredible statement of acceptance, of recognition that God is sovereign over all things, both the good and the bad.
He's acknowledging that everything he had was ultimately a gift from God. And even in taking those gifts away, God is still worthy of praise.
Exactly. And the narrator makes a point of emphasizing, in all this, Job did not sin with his lips.
So even in his deepest grief and despair, he's holding on to his faith. He's refusing to blame God.
It's a testament to the incredible strength of his character and the depth of his trust in God.
But as we know, the suffering doesn't end there. Satan gets his second chance, and he strikes Job with those terrible sores. The text describes them as loathsome, which just paints this horrific picture of physical pain and agony.
And we find Job in this utterly wretched state, sitting among the ashes, scraping himself with a broken piece of pottery. It's an image of complete desolation and despair.
And then we're introduced to another character in this story, Job's wife. Now, this next part is particularly unsettling and raises some really tough questions.
What happens?
Well, Job's wife, seeing her husband in this unimaginable state of suffering, she pleads with him to just give up, to curse God and die.
Wow, that's a pretty intense reaction.
It is, and it's understandable in a way. I mean, to see someone you love going through that kind of pain, it would be natural to want it to end, even if it meant death.
It's a deeply human response, born out of desperation and compassion, but it's also presented as a form of temptation.
Oh, interesting. So she's almost echoing the Satan's desire for Job to curse God.
In a way, yes. But it's important to remember that she's speaking from a place of profound grief and anguish.
So how does Job respond to this?
Well, he rebukes her, saying, "You speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?"
He's basically saying that we can't just pick and choose when we'll accept God's will, right? We have to trust him in the good times and the bad.
Exactly. And once again, the narrator makes a point of stating, in all this, Job did not sin with his lips.
So even when tempted to give up, to turn his back on God, he refuses to do so.
It's another incredible demonstration of his unwavering faith.
And then, just when you think things can't possibly get any worse, here come Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. They hear about all the horrible things that have happened to him, and they come to offer their condolences.
And their initial reaction is really quite telling. They're so overwhelmed by the sight of Job's suffering that they tear their robes, throw dust into the air, and then they just sit with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights without saying a word.
Wow, 7 days of silence. That's a powerful statement.
It really is. They recognize the depth of his pain, and they understand that words are simply inadequate in the face of such profound loss.
It's like they're acknowledging that there's nothing they can say that will truly comfort him in this moment.
Exactly. Their silence is a testament to the sheer magnitude of Job's suffering.
But after this extended period of silence, something shifts, right?
It does. Job finally breaks the silence, but what comes out of his mouth isn't a curse directed at God, but a curse against the day he was born.
It curses the day he was born.
It's this raw, visceral cry of anguish. He wishes that the day of his birth had never happened, that it could be completely erased from time.
It's like he's so overwhelmed by pain and despair that he can't even bear the thought of his own existence.
Exactly. And it's important to note that the text emphasizes that he doesn't actually curse God, nor does he curse himself or anyone else.
So he's not directly blaming God for his suffering.
No, his lament is directed at the very fact of his own being. He's expressing this deep sense of injustice, this righteous anger that stems from his belief in his own innocence.
So he doesn't feel guilty in a way that would somehow make his pain more understandable or acceptable.
Exactly. And this tension between his suffering and his belief in his own righteousness is really at the heart of his struggle.
There's a lot of may in his lament, isn't there?
Yes, he's using it almost like a curse, wishing all sorts of terrible things on the day of his birth.
And the underlying question, the question that keeps surfacing, is that fundamental why.
Right. He's grappling with the question of why this is happening to him, why someone who has lived a blameless life should be subjected to such unimaginable suffering.
And he's not getting any answers, is he?
Not yet. He's trapped in this cycle of pain and despair with no way to escape.
So even though he doesn't directly curse God, there's definitely an element of protest in his words, isn't there?
Absolutely. He's railing against the injustice of his situation, and while he may not be directly accusing God, there's certainly an implied accusation in his lament.
It's like he's saying, how could you let this happen to me?
Exactly. And there's this profound sense of abandonment, this fear that God has turned his back on him.
So he's caught in this internal struggle, this conflict between his knowledge of God and his utter ignorance of God's ways.
Yeah, and it's this tension that will drive the rest of the story as he tries to reconcile his experience of suffering with his faith in a God who is supposed to be just and merciful.
So let's recap where we are. We've seen Job, this incredibly righteous and prosperous man, suddenly face unimaginable loss and suffering. He loses his wealth, all 10 of his children, and then his own health is brutally attacked. But despite all of this, he initially responds with faith and worship, refusing to curse God.
It's a powerful testament to the strength of his faith and the resilience of the human spirit.
But as we've seen, his suffering continues, and his wife, out of her own desperation, urges him to give up, to curse God and die. Job, however, remains steadfast in his faith, refusing to turn his back on God.
And then his friends arrive, offering their silent support before Job finally breaks down and curses the day he was born.
It's a heartbreaking moment as he grapples with the sheer injustice of his situation, questioning why this is happening to someone who has lived a blameless life.
And this is where we leave Job, for now, caught between his faith and his despair, searching for answers to questions that seem to have no easy solutions.
And this first part of Job's journey really does touch on those fundamental, universal questions that we all grapple with. Why do bad things happen to good people? What is justice when faced with suffering that seems so random and senseless? And how do we hold on to our faith, whatever that may mean to us, when everything we thought was secure is ripped away?
It's a story that continues to resonate with us today because it speaks to the deepest parts of the human experience.
And coming up next, we'll dive into the responses of Job's friends. We'll see how they try to make sense of his suffering, offering explanations that may bring comfort or may actually exacerbate his pain.
It's the beginning of a long and complex debate, a battle of ideas and theologies as they grapple with the nature of suffering, the role of sin, and the mysterious workings of divine justice.
So as you go about your day, I want you to ponder this. In the face of suffering that seems to have no logical explanation, what is the foundation of your own understanding of justice? What is your connection to something bigger than yourself, something that can provide meaning and purpose even in the darkest of times? And how would you respond if you were in Job's shoes?
These are questions that challenge us to examine our own beliefs, to confront the mysteries of life, and to grapple with the ultimate meaning of suffering and faith.
And we'll continue to explore these questions in our next deep dive.
So join us next time as we delve deeper into the world of Job and confront the age-old problem of suffering and the search for meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and unfair.
And until then, keep searching, keep questioning, and keep believing that even in the midst of darkness, there is always hope.
Now that we have unpacked Book of Job a bit, we encourage you to reflect on how these truths can be applied to your life this week. For ongoing encouragement, follow Grace Gospel Church on social media GGEFDE on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and more. Subscribe for more deep dive conversations each week as we explore the messages from Grace Gospel Church. For more resources to grow in faith, Visit www.gracegospel.church. We pray for your continued growth in faith.